I find water fascinating, especially flowing water, and it draws me into another space. And I think there is this part of me which wants to be somewhere else, like not in the material world. And there's also part of me which is very engaged with what's happening. And these interplay constantly. In the environmental work which I do, which is outside or in a different realm of my engagement, part of what drives me is the sense of why should things be wrong, why can't they be right. It's not only political, it's also my personal struggle with what sense I make of my own life. And I think it's unclear to me, so it oscillates between science, politics, aesthetics, what is it all about. And somehow what draws me to the aesthetic experience of taking pictures or making videos is that it's one space where you don't have to define whether it's this or that. You just bring yourself to that space, whatever that is. The Alien Waters work came from a desire to seek a personal space when I was going through a hard personal time, and I wanted to seek out spaces which I was familiar with. In a sense, it becomes my new companion. When I'm in my own creative space, nothing else really matters. It can take you out of anything. So it's a great blessing, to be able to escape life, the material life through the camera. The immersion work was the last series of work I did in that Alien Waters body of work. To me, it was a personal inscription of my own location, that while the river was dying and the shroud is the symbol of the dead, but I'm standing and that I'm not dead. And it's also that, the first water you have when you are born as a Hindu is the water of the river. And when you die, you're immersed in the river. So there is this ongoing mythology of the constant cycle of life and death, and the river is very much part of it. So it's been written about in different ways, aesthetic, political. It could all be true or not be true, I don't know, but in a sense I brought myself to that moment. People call it a self-performatory photograph or self-performance or a stage photograph. I was a documentary photographer, and I hadn't encountered any of these terms. But I was also shifting in what I was thinking about the document itself. It was becoming less and less about what's outside, but what's my relationship to something. The flowers work came subsequently because I was invited to a residency by Khoj. And to me it was a very important residency because I ended up expanding my language. If you've grown up as a classical street photographer and never been to art school, then you're not exposed to anything but the language of photography. And here you find that you are free to use so many languages. So I went upstream, which is still surprisingly in the city, because half the river is black and half the river is blue. And as I went upstream, I saw these gorgeous flower fields, and they were just so beautiful. So I'm very interested not only in the aesthetics but what's going on. And so I became like an amateur anthropologist, amateur economist, and discovered the whole dynamics of land and land change. Part of the work is to bring the multiple identities of the river alive through the real people. How do you make the city recognize the river is not just a water channel which needs to be clean? It's a whole body of culture, of mythology, and of life, and of ecology. Lack of imagination, our inability to imagine something in its entirety, that we come to very narrow understandings and come up with this saying, oh, this is good for the environment, but it's not, even if it's bad for livelihood. We cannot, this is not the way. This holistic approach has to be there. You can see that a lot of my work is to deal with opening up landscapes which are much more complex than what we might imagine. It's a complex reality we live in. And somehow in our institutional policy and public imaginations, we are shy of this complex reality. So we'll say, okay, it's good if it's science, but it's bad if it's belief. But we are both. Science is part of our knowing, but also our not knowing is part of our knowing. Somehow we have taken science to be the new religion, but science never proposed itself to be the new religion. Science proposes as a method to create some knowledge. And science is always in doubt by its very nature. But when we have displaced the traditional religions, we have now built this idea of science as a new religion. I'll tell you, many scientists I know, when they're doing something really important, they go to the temple and pray. I know a priest who lives on the river, and the river is very dirty, and every day at 4 o'clock he will take a bath. And I said, why do you take a bath? The river is so dirty. He said, this is my mother, and I've been doing it for the last 40 years. I'm fit and fine. Nothing's happened to me. I have faith in this river. Now, who am I to deny him that faith? And who understands that faith? So I don't want to sort of say that faith is good or that science is bad. I just want to say that it is complicated. We have to be able to live in a complex world. And so river is not only a view. River is also culture, it's also mythology, it's also relationship, it's also water, it's also livelihood. And how do we then create a river in a city which has all these things intact? I think this is something we seem to have forgotten. We are now trying to recover the river as real estate and have nature as a view. You know, you could talk to somebody here about the river and they say the river is dead. I talked to a friend, I'm doing this project in the river. I say, what project? The river is dead. I said, no, you go there, it's very much alive. The people who live there, you know, and they have a fine life. So it's not dead. It's your imagination which is dead. I'm in deep question about what is this nature we have constructed. And is the only way we relate to nature is to the aesthetics of it. There are so many readings of nature, but somehow the only way we can deal with nature right now is through some kind of category like this. And I'm concerned that if we then have no other ways of dealing with nature, are we predetermining its future, its destruction? Extinction and nature is very closely tied together in my mind. I wanted to explore the idea of extinction. What does extinction mean? We have lost 97% of our 10 million vulture population in 15 years. This is the first time I did a big public art project. My work was on the busiest roundabout of the city. You know, probably 1 million cars pass every day from central Delhi to North Delhi from that roundabout. And it's very heavily policed. So one evening, this very senior policeman came to me and said, are you responsible for this? I said, yes. And immediately, instead of saying, you know, what is all this? He said, you know, we had vultures in my village when I was growing up. There are none now. And what should we do about it? Suddenly, he was just a normal person. And he was talking to me like no policeman would ever talk to you on the street without any authority. And I had a feeling that if only I placed 2 chairs on the pavement, people will stop and have a conversation. They're dying to talk. We need to rethink what the relationship with nature is. We never think of nature in terms of a relationship. We always think in terms of an object as outside and inside. The Deadwood series is about me holding a dead branch and a live branch. It is through my relationship it becomes dead or alive. In a very Eastern sense, it's about your self-relationship to something. So nature is dead or alive because how you relate to it. The way I am conscious about my life changes my responsibilities. This belief that truth lies somewhere outside of yourself is completely erroneous. These are all self-portrait, short self-portrait images done for a show on Gandhi. It's about the search for 3 essential parts of a personal truth or a personal search, and I don't know where to find them. In one, I'm looking for truth. The second one is I'm standing on these masters of Western philosophy, and I'm looking out naked and trying to think of knowing beyond knowledge. It's the idea of wisdom beyond knowledge. And the third is about should I find happiness. There's this little white boat which can take me across the river. The river as a metaphoric journey of life. Then this red thing of this violence, of this political sphere, and I'm running away from both, saying I don't want redemption, I don't want to be political. Where should I go? You know, if without religion and politics, where should I turn? To me, it's an image which says many things. The body was meant to be look like a body, but it wasn't a body. It was real and unreal. It was death, but it was not dead. It's also about violence, but it's also about a mannequin. I think we are not very different from that mannequin. In some way, we are plastic, and robotic, and also alive and not alive. So in a sense, to me, it resonates many things. The richness of life lies in the complexity, not in the reduction of it. This particular work, body of work, Urbanscapes, was an experiment at creating juxtapositions. It's my engagement with both sides of the city. Like one picture is from my home study, and it was in April, and the laburnum was in full bloom. You know, it was a beautiful tree, and for the rest of the year, it's completely bleak and desolate, and for 1 month, it comes alive. And it was like so lifting. The same morning, I had gone to this really bleak neighborhood and taken pictures, and I couldn't decide what was it. And so some of these came from this complete uncertainty of where we are and who we are. And I think in some ways or another, I try and find form for that uncertainty, of not knowing, of being vulnerable in the not knowing. And I'm uncertain about the future, so I don't have a didactic position, as you might say an activist should have, of I know what is good. I don't know what is good. So it's the same thing with the new urbanization. I don't know what is good. There is both a sense of personal loss and despair, but I also see many hopes in that space, from many people's eyes. I'm interested in this idea of uncertainty, and so it's an attempt at that. It's not that I will know the answer, but it's the struggle of knowing the answer which makes me human. The aesthetic experience is such a strong part of being an artist. It's such an important part, and it's not only about a fixed idea of beauty. You can find beauty in almost anything. I found the sewage pond fascinatingly beautiful, and it was completely polluted. And that the star machines were machines I encountered one morning when I was going for a drive along the river, and they looked so alive. I was trained in science, formally trained in science, but I also know that my aesthetic experience is outside of science. All this work had a very strong aesthetic connection, and it's a very important part of how I work. There's an inherent sense of great beauty in that moment for me. It's very pleasurable to be encountering and taking those pictures. What draws me back again and again and again is to re-experience, an orgasmic kind of thing. You want to experience it again. You feel so excited, and it's such a high for you. Suddenly you found something you connect with. And I think that's the nicest part about what always drew me to photography since I was 13 years old. It is this moment which draws me. If this moment was not there, I would stop doing it. It would have no meaning for me. I'm the artist I am. This is what I know and what I can do. But the attempt to be something, to constantly explore, is the reason I'm the artist. If you are in the doing of things, then you can be a campaigner, an activist, you can be an artist all at the same time, because you're constantly doing something which you think should be done. Some work goes to another level, and some work just stays with me. I started photographing because When I was 13, my father gave me his old camera. I had some fight with him, and to make me happy, gave me a little QL17, Canon QL17. I remember the first photograph I took also. I emptied a store, made a dark room when I was 16, and I was on my way. So I was shooting, I was photographing because I wanted to, and I didn't want to be a commercial photographer. I was very clear about that. And there's no other way you could make a living except by doing something else. So I had a parallel life of an engineer and then an activist. And when OCWI asked me to participate in Document 11, I was totally innocent of that. But what happened later sort of jolted me out of my innocence, because if you're a documenter, I realized that you are suddenly, people are interested and wondering why you're there. And I guess that was the thing, because OCWIans were then moved away from the traditional art world and got 3 people into Document 11 who were not artists, never called themselves artists. So I think that was the encounter the art world had with the non-art world. And slowly it has now expanded its boundary of what is art, who is the artist. And the language and the acceptance has changed. So I think it's also expanded very quickly and to encompass different forms and formats. And it's an ongoing process. I guess many people felt they had greater claim to be in a big show than somebody unknown like me, in a sense, which is understandable. So that's how the art world came to me. And it's an interesting place to know. It's also something you have to navigate. It has its own institutional spaces and its pitfalls, I would say. I'm keen to make that as part of my possibility, but not keen to make that part of my desire. If you seek beauty, you'll never find it. So it's the same thing. If you seek art, you will not find it. You have to do what you do and let the world does what it does.